I want to read from this devotional, Glimpses of Grace, by Madeleine L'Engle. She says, Christ can speak to me through a white china Buddha who sits on my desk and smiles at me tolerantly while I fly into a torrent of rage or self-pity. That forbearing smile helps restore my sense of proportion and rids me of that self-will that keeps me caught up in myself so that I am isolating myself from Christ. Of course, I am no more likely to become a Buddhist than my parents were to turn to Islam when they framed those lovely verses from the Quran. There is no limit to the ways in which Christ can speak to us, though for the Christian, he speaks first and most clearly through Jesus of Nazareth. Indeed, my icons would be idols if they did not lead me to follow more closely in Jesus's steps. Now, growing up 30 years ago or more, if I'd read that, I would have interpreted that as relativism, as pluralism, as something fundamentally inimical to or inconsistent with the lordship of Christ in historic Christian orthodoxy. I now have a very different view of the words of L'Engle here and how, in fact, they can be interpreted in a way that is fully consistent with the lordship of Christ, and which, in fact, has a whole lot of wisdom to share for us. I think here of the words of Abraham Kuyper, who famously said, there is not a square inch in the whole of creation over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry, mine. There is not a square inch in the whole domain of our human existence over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry, mine. In other words, Christ claims it all. Christ claims all of creation. Christ claims all of human existence. But then here's a reality. What happens if there is something in the world which leads you further to truth in a particular moment? Well, then Christ claims mine over that thing in that moment. What if a Buddhist statue sitting on your desk in a particular moment reminds you of the need to have forbearance, to develop strength of character in a way that is consistent with Christian discipleship and sanctification? Well, then in that moment, Christ says of that statue, mine. It is all Christ's. As the saying goes, all truth is God's truth. And we really, when we try to otherize things outside of the narrower confines of the church or the Judeo-Christian tradition of revelation by saying those are just things of darkness and the world, we really limit the Spirit's work. And we frankly and ironically limit Christ's lordship over all by saying that Christ cannot work through a Buddhist statue sitting on your desk. In fact, we should be very careful about putting constraints on the lordship of Christ. And so here's the great irony, that very far from being pluralism or relativism, these words shared by Madeleine L'Engle are, for us, I think, properly understood and applied in a Orthodox Christian context. They are an invitation to find some of the ways, some of the perhaps nuanced and surprising ways that Christ is Lord over all and over all of creation does declare mine.